Well, welcome, Rick, to this episode of LTADchat Shorts, where we do a one-on-one conversation. A picture is worth 1,000 words. We usually go one slide. Today, we're going to focus on the wellness wheel. And I know this is something that you like to talk about, being an author on the NSCA's long-term athletic development position statement. We know that pillar number 5 relates to health and wellness being central to the development of young people. And I know that you like to use the wellness wheel in your presentations when you talk about pillar 5. And let's just go with your thoughts on the wellness wheel. Like, what does this mean to you? What do you think coaches, parents, and other individuals who work with young people, not necessarily young athletes, but just young people and positive youth development, what should they be taking away from the wellness wheel?
Well, Joe, thank you. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the wellness wheel, because it's something that we don't often share in terms of when we're talking about sports and the health and well-being of young people and even adults. So it was originally intended, the wellness wheel was, for adults back in like the 1950s. You know, when I first heard the term wellness, I was probably like most people, and you kind of get like this out in the forest, tree hugging, spiritual kind of thing that you think of with wellness as a construct. But it's very different from that. So the more you really look into it, one of the issues that we have with wellness in general, I think in our population, is people don't embrace it. So I think it was good with the position statement that it said the health and well-being, because those are terms that people kind of understand a little bit better, embrace a little bit more. But a lot of these terms are really interchangeable. The wellness, I like that term a lot better because it's an action term. So it's it's something that you're working towards. You're actively involved in this process of becoming well. So to have that as a definition and have all of these different components, I think are hugely important. You and I, most of the people in our field, are really concerned and studied it intensively, the physical domain. So the one that's over there at about 3 o'clock. So if you look at the wellness wheel in the physical domain, we know just about everything we need to know about how to train kids, what they should do. Even for adults, if you think about it, like what is an exercise prescription? What should we know and be able to do? And especially in where we are now societally with everything going on, recognizing the value of preventive care to be able to get us to where we need to go, but it's still not happening. So even though most of us focus on the physical dimension of wellness, we're still really not doing what we need to with that. Physical also includes things like recovery, sleep, nutrition, and other things like that, which should really be critically important all across the board. There's an interesting study I saw not too long ago. I'm trying to remember from where it came, but I think it was one of Neurojanti's studies, where they looked at travel teams. So these were like high school travel teams, and they found that the kids were very lacking in sleep. They were falling asleep in school, all for the sake of being on a travel team and going to these big tournaments on the weekends. So what were they giving up? They weren't even maximizing their own physical development. So I think when we look at this from a sports context, how are we developing any of these things? Because there's really not a lot of evidence that tells us that even the physical domain is being well developed in a lot of kids playing sports. Their ability to play a sport is being developed perhaps at some level, but as they grow and develop, is it actually matching where they're going or not? So there's an argument that, well, you know, they're getting that social element too. Well, if they're playing that same sport, they're only getting that social element within that one group. And a lot of times that group is developed for the parents. The parents get that social set of other parents that they like to hang around with. So they keep the kids in those programs so that the parents all kind of have their own social set to be able to take care of. So I like looking at all of the different elements of the wellness wheel here, because if one of these elements is flat, the wheel is flat. So we need to be able to develop all of these across childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. So this really is a cradle to grave model where we're looking to see, are we actually helping our kids and adults get to where they need to be? I'll just pick on the occupational one, because a lot of times people say, well, how does that really fit? And if you look at it from a youth sports perspective, how many parents are working 2 or 3 jobs now just to try to get their kids to be able to play a sport, to be able to pay the travel fees, then travel with their kids and do all these different things? So what impact is that actually having on their emotional wellness? So we've seen, like in the COVID era, when families were back together again, a lot of parents are going, wow, this is pretty neat. I get to be with my kids again. You're spending so much time traveling for what you thought was what the kids actually needed, but nobody ever did a check. I think what we're seeing now in a lot of these return to play models and return to practice models and whatever, they're starting to include a lot of these questions. Are the children mentally ready to return? Are the parents willing to go back there? You see a lot of that for returning to school, which I'm finding fascinating. Are the parents emotionally ready to have their kids back in that environment? The environmental part of the wellness wheel, I think, is interesting too. When we're talking about maybe we need to get our kids to stay closer to home. With a lot of these travel teams that the kids have been on, our local communities have suffered because they're traveling to all these pre-made communities where they spent a fortune to have these fantastic turf fields. So what's been the condition of our own neighborhoods and our own towns and cities across the country? So now that there's that focus coming back on looking at what we need to do in our own environment, I think that's going to have a huge impact as we grow our model back again, hopefully, that we don't go back to that same model. And I'm seeing it already that travel teams are being really harnessed as to how far they can actually travel. So those are a couple other the key pieces there so far. The emotional part, we're looking at the social emotional learning aspect, which is huge for our kids, and the pressure to play, the pressure to do well, the pressure to perform, and not necessarily giving them every opportunity to learn different sports, to be with different social groups, to be able to look at all of these aspects from a different point of view, even playing in a different field. So for kids, the variety is really important for them to get a variety of exposures and experience, because really the wellness wheel is a nice vehicle if you look at it from a long-term athletic development model perspective. If we're gonna promote the health and well-being of all kids, in our quest leading toward a physically literate culture, we want everybody to have the experiences and exposures to be able to pick and choose what they want for their lifetime fitness activities. If we're not giving them the experiences and not looking at it on the wellness wheel perspective, we're kind of shortchanging our kids from that particular point of view.
A lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff there, Rick.
Yeah, I'll pause.
Yeah, I know you like to talk about if one side of the wellness wheel is flat, then it doesn't work so well, right? Like,
Correct.
I like to ask people, what's your quality of life score? On a scale of 1 to 10, what's your quality of life score? And they'll answer, oh, I don't know, about a 7.8 or an 8.5. And then my follow-up question is always like, what could make that better? Sometimes it's not the physical side, it could be emotional or social or environmental or whatever. So again, and you alluded to this early on about in our profession, strength and conditioning, youth fitness, athletic development, physical education, whatever sphere you're in, we focus so much on the physical. And I think a good point is making sure that we're aware of the other parts of the wheel here. So when these youngsters roll into our facilities or our environments, we have an understanding of other things that are impacting their quality of life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think we're starting to see that in our prescription, more or less, of what we're asking kids to do. So are we actually giving them time to play? We've been so prescriptive with dictating every minute of every child's day that they have not been able to actually be kids and to grow socially and emotionally in that context, because we think that they have to be ultimately scheduled all the time. And as parents, we're concerned of having our kids have some time to themselves to do that. What are the risks that are involved there? But we can create a strength and conditioning, physical education environment where kids can be safe and they can have the opportunity to be kids and still learn, because as we always talk about, kids can get a lot of experience out of learning how to solve the movement problems on their own, not necessarily being so prescriptive. They're going to run this drill and do that drill, run this exercise. There's something to be said for structured activity, certainly, but we need to also have a balance of semi-structured and unstructured play for kids so that they could grow and develop among all these different elements. If we're not asking them the questions about their own development, how are we actually going to get them to get the intrinsic motivation to buy into what we're asking them to do? If we just keep telling them things, they never learn. And I always like to go back to the study that NATA did a number of years ago with college athletes. These were Division I college athletes. After their college playing days were over, within 1 year, they were as out of condition and as injury risk averse as the general population, because nobody had ever taught them how to do it, what to do it, or create it on their own. So they didn't feel comfortable and confident to be able to create their own exercise program after their playing days were done. So their wellness wheel went flat right after their playing days were over.
Yeah. Hey, Rick, we like to keep these LTAD shorts short. So we're going to wrap up here. And as we do, let's leave the listeners with, you know, 1, 2, or 3 really key points of the wellness wheel. So if I'm a parent, if I'm a sport coach, if I'm a physical educator, if I'm a pediatrician, what are, 1, 2, or 3 really key points that you think people should take away from the wellness wheel?
Well, I think the one key point, and I'll go back to Tom Ferry's project, Play with Ask the Kids. I think we never ask the kids like we should to find out what actually works for them. How do we help them to develop? Kids are much smarter in those contexts than we used to be. So how do we actually help them to develop their physical? What do they like to do? What do they want to do? What groups would they want to be on? Let them be doing part of the warm up and incorporating what they like to do into our everyday activities. I think that's huge. I think another key things is us as the adults, we need to be able to supervise and oversee the growth and development of kids in their context with what's best for the kids, not adultify the situation. So just because we like to have a prescriptive, well drawn out program doesn't mean that that's the way that life always works. So how do we actually incorporate all of these different elements, the dimensions of wellness into the program? Because like we started off saying, wellness is actually an active construct. It's something we need to actively participate in. So we as adults need to model the wellness wheel, first of all, so that we can make sure that our kids are following along with what we're saying, that we wholeheartedly believe in it, and so will they. And then as a process, and I think too often we put in one pile kids and in one pile adults. So how do we get kids and adults all figuring out how to work together from that cradle to grave approach to make sure that we're all on the path to wellness?
Good. Rick, thanks a lot for sharing your insights on the wellness wheel. Again, something I know that you can talk about for a few hours here.
Good.
But yeah, thanks for the brief overview. If people are wondering where they can find an image like we have on the screen here, it's always a Google search away. If you just, put in keywords wellness wheel, go to images, you're going to find a lot of different variations of the wellness wheel, and just find one for your liking and environment. So Rick, thanks a lot for being on LTADchat.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep, you're welcome. Have a good day.
Yeah, you do. Thanks.